Okay, so we thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. And the source of our learning, we should have the Beis Mikdash immediately. We start the new parak on Daf Kafdala, that's 24a, towards the bottom. Let me just mute. Okay. Starts like this. Kol get shenichtav shaloi l'shamisha. Some versions of this kol haget. But any get that was not written l'shma. Yeah, it's written funny a little bit. Should have said kol get shaloi nichtav l'shamisha. Here it's like any get that was written not for a woman, not for a woman. Okay, whatever the case is. It was not written for the sake of a woman, so for divorce, it's possible. It has to be written l'shma that we've been learning the whole time. Keitzad, what would be an example of that? Let's say someone's walking in the marketplace. From market, he hears the sound of the scribes that are calling out, Ish pleni megarish es plenis mimakam pleni. This man is divorcing his wife, so and so. Thank you. This man, so and so, is divorcing his wife, so and so, from such and such a place. Amar, and the person says, that's me, that's my name. That's the name of my wife. And I guess it's the name of the place as well that he doesn't have to announce. So he says, Pasal Garish Bay. He can't use that to divorce his wife. We're going to see in the Gemara that it wasn't actually the scribes that were saying that, it was the scribe teachers that were saying that, and they were telling the students to write. And it was really a practice get. The Gemara is going to explain that. And what do you know? The practice get turned out to be his exact name.
Oh.
That's how it's going to be explained in the Gemara. Yeah, we'll see. We're going to have 4 cases here. So
he doesn't actually see what's being printed.
He just
him what it says.
He hears them announcing that this is what they're writing.
Okay.
And he can't use it, even though it has his name on it. Yeah. Yes, sir, mikan. Yes, mikan means more than such. We have a bigger chiddush. It goes like this. He wrote a get. Someone wrote a get to divorce his wife. V'nimlach. And then nimlach means he changed his mind. He had second thoughts. But he goes out, he sees someone from his city, probably from the city where the get was written. And he says, my name is like your name, and my wife's name is the same name as your wife.
Like a third party has to write get. I didn't know like the husband can write his own get.
Husband can write a get, but it's usually a scribe. So here it's probably a scribe. It says kasav l'garish. It means he had written. It doesn't have to mean that he wrote it. And the rule is pasal l'garish but can't use this get, even though all the names are correct. But you can't use it to divorce. It wasn't written for himself. It wasn't written for his wife. Yes, mikan. Now we're on top of 24b. More than this, if a person had 2 wives, and they have the same name. I don't know how he calls them. It's not by the last name. And he must have a hyphenated last name. So, but their first name is the same. The only problem is that when in the get you use all the names. You write in, even if there's a name that they go by, you have to write that as well. Right, Ravena 1, Ravena 2. But then you would have to actually say in the get, Ravena 1 and Ravena 2. So we're talking about that they had 2 wives, they both had the same name. Because one of them you just said louder. So Kasav L'Garish Asagdeli wanted to divorce the bigger one. L'Yagarish Besigtana, he can't use it to divorce the smaller one. Probably means younger, not bigger. Younger and older and younger. Yes, Mikan. More than this, Amar Lalavla Kasaiv. He tells a bigger chiddush. He tells a scribe to write. You just write a get. I have 2 wives, both with the same name, so it doesn't matter. And I'll figure out later which one I want to divorce. This is like Survivor of some sort. Whoever's left, we'll see. get rid of one every month. We'll just one way. Okay, we'll see who it's going to be. That'll keep them on their toes. So pasal garsh, but you can't use a get like that because it wasn't written for the sake of that wife. Okay. The Gemara explains. Person wrote a get for his wife and then changed his mind. Gemara says, you told me 4 cases over here. The first case was he hears him saying his name and his wife's name and the name of the city. And he says, hey, let me go use that get. Next one is someone was writing a get and he changed his mind. And the guy says, well, maybe you want to use the get because you have the same name. So we asked, what's the difference in the first case and the second case? Both of them, someone was writing a get and he changed his mind. What's the case?
First one is different because he's not the one writing it, and it's just basically ignoring how that name happens to be his, and he's choosing not to use it. So he never wrote it or anything.
In the second one?
The second one was
an actual person writing a get and also changed his mind not to use it. So basically, he's taking a get from.
But in the second case, that was also used for someone else too.
Someone was planning on using it, but then he changed his mind. So it looks like the first case is someone was planning on using it, but changed his mind.
Get with meant for another couple with the same name. That's not being.
That's the second one is a get that was meant for another couple. The first one, we're not really sure what's going on. We're going to see in a moment. But the Gemara thinks right now that it's also was a get that was meant for another couple, and he's taking it. So Amar Rav Papa explains B'Sefer Masiyan L'Islam Askina. We're actually talking about scribes that Masiyan L'Islam means that it's usual for them to study, but what it means here is that they're practicing, and it wasn't even written by another couple. This was just a school, and it was a scribal school, and they were practicing to write a get. And the teacher said, "Okay, today you're going to write Ruvain is divorcing Ruvena," and that was today's practice. And he walks by, he says, "Hey, what do you know?" But there was no one there that was actually being divorced. Amar Ravashi says, "Dekanami, I'll prove it to you. It's also precise in our Mishnah. It says Seifrin Makrin. The Seifrin were calling out. Like Tani Seifrin Kairin, it doesn't say the Seifrin were calling out. It says Makrin, which means they were having called out or causing to call out. Makrin is the hifel. It's causing. They were having the students say, dictating, as opposed to saying,
Yeah, it starts dictating. It's not
Yeah, what he wants to say is that it's that it's being taught, and it's not actually that there's a teacher there that's saying. Yeah, do they use the term dictate in there? Yeah. They also say dictate. Right.
And this would be in the shuk. This would be taking place in the shuk.
Yeah. Why is it in the shuk? You're asking why is the school in the shuk? That was the best way to fundraise for the yeshiva. In public. Probably that was just a gathering area. He walked by, and there was that was where they were practicing. Did he hear it from the shuk? The business school, right? He was over b'shuk, and he hears it. Now, does this mean that the Sefer needs to say what he's writing? That's what it sounded like to me. It sounded like that they were calling out. It means he has to say, "I'm writing this get on behalf of this," or he has to say that the words that he's writing. That's what it sounded like. Then when you're translating as dictate, that just means that there's a teacher that's dictating, but the students don't need to say anything. That's what it sounds like. At least from that, from the word dictate. Okay. My yeser mikan. What is it? What are you telling me that this one is bigger than a bigger chiddush, more interesting than the last one? It's well, Tana de Beir Rabbi Shmuel, it was taught in the yeshiva Rabbi Shmuel. We're going to go in 4 steps over here. So each one of these cases, it's progressively a bigger chiddush. We start off with the most obvious. Says the first one is of course puzzle, because it wasn't even written for divorce. It was written just as a practice handwriting. A new idea for school to get the kids to practice the handwriting. Have them write Gittin. I should get them to write a ksuba. That would be nicer. But a ksuba they do with calligraphy. You know, you could do a calligraphy ksuba. But a get has to be written with the. Sefer writes actually like a mezuzah, right? Well, actually, the first thing they would write is Megillah because it doesn't have Hashem's name. But when the original practice, they just write letters or random. Make a aleph 100 times. Right. Yeah, they were teaching them to write. That could be. It could be. Yeah. So the first one wasn't even a get. So, but it wasn't written for divorce. But the second one was written for divorce. It just wasn't him and it wasn't his wife. But it's nevertheless it's possible. And not only the one that wasn't written for his divorce, is possible. Even if it was written for his divorce, it was just not written for the wife, for the right wife. It was written for the older one and he used it for the younger one, or the opposite. Now we have even a bigger chiddush. Chiddush number 4. It's possible. Even if it was written for her, we just didn't know about it right now. Because he says, write a get for my wife, and he has 2 wives by the same name. And he says, and I'll divorce whichever one I decide is the one that I don't like. So ultimately, it was written for this one, but we'll say that wasn't good because it didn't have in mind at that time who it was written for. My time, what's the reason all of these are puzzle? If the pasuk would have said "B'nasan sefer krisis biyada" that he should put the bill of divorce in her hand, then I would have understood. Just the first one is invalid. Why? Because the first one wasn't the le'av l'shum krisis. It wasn't made for a divorce. It was made for practice writing. But if he wrote it actually to divorce his wife, nimlach, and he changed his mind, that was written for divorce, just he didn't use it, someone else used it. In kasha, I would say that it's kosher. So it says no, it has to be written. That means he has to write it. Kasav, and he writes, not someone else writes for his wife. This person himself has to write. No, it doesn't mean he has to write. It means he could tell a scribe, he could tell a shliach to write it, or a scribe to write it, but it has to be from him.
Just a quick question. Did we learn that the woman pays for it?
We learned that the woman, we learned that for practical reasons, the woman pays for it, but traditionally the husband should pay for it because it's supposed to be his.
So I'm wondering, if a woman pays for it, how is it his?
So we said that she has to give it to him.
She gives it to him, so he gives it to her?
Yeah. Yeah, the reason why they switched that the woman should pay for it is because if there would be any sort of difficulty on the husband to pay for the get, he would say, yeah, I don't have the money. And then she would say, well, tough luck. He would say, well, you have to wait. I have other bills to pay first. You're not my priority. So we say she pays for the get. No, it's not. He can't make any of those claims.
So even though she pays for it, it's his.
Yeah.
He's giving it to her.
Yeah, we had a discussion somewhere where Rav Chisda said I could passel all the gittin in the world, and we said, how would he do that? He said, well, maybe he would passel it by saying that since the wife pays for it, so it's not really his. And the Gemara said, well, why should that be a problem? Bezdin can transfer money from one person to another. They could hefker Bezdin hefker. You know, they could.
Right.
That shouldn't be a real issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. He has to write it and give it, but he doesn't actually have to do the writing himself. He is a messenger, just like the giving of it. He could have someone deliver it, right? Yeah, it could be. It could be. Okay. So we have the kasav. The kasav tells me that he has to write it and not someone else, some other husband writing it for his wife. Ikas Rahman of kasav, if it would just say that he has to write it, have him in al I would think that it would just exclude the one where some other couple was writing it. Because he didn't write it. But if he had two wives, he was the one that was writing it or having it written for one of his wives. Hey, makasher, I would say that it is kosher because he wrote it. Kasav Rahman Allah says no, it has to be the kasav law sefer krisis. He writes for her, it has to be for her lishma. So the Gemara says sefer lamali. So then I have three halachas already. What do you need the fourth halacha where he says that he tells the scribe to write it, and whichever one he decides he's going to use, he's going to divorce. Hakamash malan, that's telling me another chiddush dein breira. That we don't say that there's a retroactive decision of which one it was for. In other words, you could say like this. He doesn't know right now which one he's writing it for, but Hashem knows. And he wrote it for whichever one he's going to want a divorce. So when he finds out which one that is that he wants a divorce, so it was retroactively, that's the one it was written for, and it should work. Kamash Malan, it doesn't work like that. He has to know then when it's being written which one it's for. We won't say breira. Breira means like a retroactive decision. That is a big discussion, which we'll get into a little bit today.
And we learned also that once a get is signed, the husband just hold on to it for as long as
until they have relations, and then it becomes called the get yashin. Then it becomes a problem. But yeah, he could postpone giving the get, but to a certain point. What's the problem with the get yashin? There may be a child that's going to come after. It's not going to be a good name for the child. She was divorced before the conception. No, it's a problem because you can't give a get after death. We would like to know that the husband's still alive in a normal case. So the Hill is asking if you give a get to someone else and say hand it to her. I think what they would do is he would hand it to the husband. Normal, this would be the normal case. He would hand it to her and then say, if I don't return, it should be a good get from now. That way the get was retroactive. It would go from the time that he gave it to her, but there was just a stipulation that needed to be fulfilled, which it was if he doesn't return.
And what happens when he returns?
Then there's no get. It was only on condition that he doesn't return, but he returned, so they're still married. Yeah. First page of Ksubas. We had a discussion there. If you make such a condition and he doesn't return because of an accident, do we say that the stipulation is that the accident doesn't affect the stipulation? He was trying to return, but the boat, whatever, something like that. Do we say that it's considered like he returned because that was just an accident or not? You were here with us, I think. You came in the middle of Chasumas. Okay. Next piece. If he wanted to divorce the older one, but he ends up he can't use it to divorce the younger one, even though they have the same name. Gemara says, very interesting. So you can't use it just for the younger one, but you can use it for the older one. Now, this is a little bit problematic because we have a whole discussion about if there's two people in town that have the same name, how do you write documents? Let's say Yosef ben Shimon is the common name. That's like John Smith or something. Yosef ben Shimon is lending money to Reuven. Now there's two Yosef ben Shimons. So Yosef ben Shimon shows up at Reuven and he says, okay, now give me the money that you owe me. So Reuven would like to say, I don't know how you got that document, but I never borrowed money from you. I borrowed money from the other guy. Get lost. The other Yosef ben Shimon.
Fingerprints.
The fingerprints, right? So he really can't tell him that. Why? Because Yosef ben Shimon is holding a document. And a document with his name on it, you can't tell him that it's not you. What do you mean? Whatever it is, I have the document. So that's even though there's a possibility.
Unless the lender had the same name.
Yeah, the lender, that's what we're talking about.
And the lender had the same name.
Yeah, the lender has the same name as someone else, but the borrower is the only guy with the name Reuven. So the lender shows up by Reuven and says, please pay me back what you owe me. Reuven would like to say that you're not the guy that lent me. I don't know how you got the document, but whatever it is, you're not the guy. And I'll pay back to the guy that really lent me, which is Yosef ben Shimon, the other one. You can't do that. But on the other hand, let's say Reuven is the lender and Yosef ben Shimon is the borrower. And Reuven shows up at Yosef ben Shimon. He says, you owe me money. Yosef ben Shimon says, he must have got the wrong guy. There is another Yosef ben Shimon. He's down the block. Go over there. He can always avoid it because he can always tell him it's because you're trying to claim money from me. You don't really have proof that it's me. It could be the other one. And I'm not holding a document that's showing that I'm guilty. On the other hand, Reuven in this case, is holding a document. In the other case, Yosef ben Shimon was holding a document. And he shows up at Reuven's door and he said, Reuven is trying to get him away, but the fact is he's holding a document. So that's a little harder. But over here, when Yosef ben Shimon is the borrower, Reuven shows up with the document. So Yosef ben Shimon says, well, there's another Yosef ben Shimon. And nowhere in this document does it say that it's me. It could be the other one.
That's why they didn't use photo IDs or anything. No way of confirming it. Witnesses that say that, okay, his name is document. But
what they would really do, there were a few options here, but one of them was that they would go to the grandfather's name if there were two people in town, that to make it valid, or everything would have to be done with witnesses. Like you would have to show up with the witnesses that knew which one it was. It would just complicate things. That these two guys with the same name, you didn't want to give a name that would be the same as someone else. It would complicate his whole life. And we would need witnesses for everything. Right. Right. Sometimes in the yeshiva, I'm talking, and there's like people start to like whisper. I want to get them quiet. So I say Mendel, and I have to choose one name, and then you want to get the most people's attention. I say Mendel. They're like, yeah. Okay.
At that point, they just call everyone by the last name.
Yeah, that's what would happen. So Rava says, you see what happened here was the woman, the younger wife cannot be divorced with this because it was written for the older wife. So the younger wife can't be divorced. So the Gemara says, it sounds like that the older wife could be divorced with it. Now, even though I have two women here with the same name, So, but that would mean I'm a Rava. Rava says, you see, what really happens here, instead of looking at the divorce process, look at the woman showing up in court with the document in her hand, saying, I'd like to get remarried. So now she has a name, it says on it, Ruvena or whatever, and she shows up in court with the document, says, I'd like to get remarried. Look, here's, I'm divorced. Well, this tells me that if there's two Yosef ben Shimons in the same city, they could actually hold a document and pull it out on someone else because they're the one that's holding the document, even though there's someone else with that name, but together with the document, that's good enough. So this woman also, together with her document, she could show up in court with her name in her document, even though there's someone else with the same name, but that would be enough that she should be able to get remarried. Amalei Abaya says, if that's how you want to view this, then let's go to the other case. What happens in the other case? I'm not talking about the guy that has two wives with the same name. So he was just looking for a match and he liked that name and said, oh, that's such a pretty name. He married two people with the same name. Talking about another guy, the first case of the Mishnah. We are not the first, it's the second case, where someone was divorcing his wife. And he goes over, he changed his mind. He goes over to his friend and he says, I'm not using it. I changed my mind. Here's a get. I already had it written. You use it. So we said, no, it's possible. But could the first guy have actually used it? The first guy would have used it. There would have been a shaila on that one as well, because it's the same name as the husband. So what would happen here? But we have a statement, the Gemara Baba Basra, that you can't pull this document out. No one else can pull out a document on them, which would mean that this woman shouldn't be able to use a document that has a different husband in it, because this would be like when a lender pulls out the document on the borrower, that there's two borrowers with there's two people with the name of the borrower. So there's a problem here when the wife pulls out a document that has the same name as her husband and someone else. Well, the truth is, if she's holding the document, that should be good enough. Just 1 second. We would say that it wasn't your husband that wrote the get. We would say that it was Yosef, the other Yosef ben Shimon, that wrote the get for his wife. Who's the lender here? Lender is, we're viewing it that the wife is the lender and the husband is the borrower. That's why this is confusing. We're viewing that you can't pull it out against the borrower that has another name that has the same name as someone else. So we're saying that two borrowers, well, yeah, but it's only one of them borrowed. So, right, it has the same name as someone else. So we're saying over here that why should the get be possible to be used even by the first husband? Because the wife we won't trust the wife when she pulls it out that it was written by her husband. We think it was written by the other husband, threw it out and she found it, and now she's showing up with this document. Okay, so what happened here was Rava says that the real one is allowed to use the document. It's only the other one that can't use the document. Abaya says if that's the case, then in the first case, we're also going to say that the real one is allowed to use the document, but over there it's going to be problematic. So the Gemara answers, or Abaya answers, it must be we're talking about that we have witnesses that watch the whole event, and we're just going to use the witnesses here as a testimony to what was really going on. If that's the case, and so even in the third case or the fourth case, when the woman has the same name as the other wife, so also over there we're talking about with these witnesses, and you really don't have any proof either way about pulling documents out on someone else that has the same name as you, as the other guy. That's in our example, and that we're setting up that the husband would be is being compared to the bara, the one that's not holding the document. Okay. I'm a Rav. Rav says we had 4 cases of Gittin here. None of them are valid. It says Kulam Psulan Paislin Bekahuna Chutz Min Harisha. All of them, all of these cases, if someone wanted to use this get, even though they're all invalid, but if the husband was a Kohen, the woman would not be allowed to remain with him, even though she's not really divorced. This is a concept called Reyach get. A rule that a Kohen is not allowed to marry a divorcee. Now, we also have another rule that if there was some sort of rumor that she's a divorcee, he also can't marry her. Now, what could have happened here is that the husband dies and she's actually a widow. She's not a divorcee. And a widow is allowed to marry a Kohen, but it's too late because there was a divorce that even though it was invalid, so she's still rabbinically prohibited from marrying a Kohen. So Rav says all of these cases have a little bit of a scent of a get, except for the first one, which is absolutely nothing. There, he just took a paper towel and gave it to his wife. He took a sheet that the kids used in school that they were practicing on. That's not a get at all. But all the other ones were actually written for divorce. That's a real get. It's just that we can't use it, but it's still enough of a get that should make her prohibited to a Kohen. Shmuel says, Shmuel says, no, the first one is also a reach get. Also has a scent of a get, which is too much for us, for a Kohen. What's the Shmuel Tamei? Shmuel follows his logic. Damar Shmuel, Kol Makim Shoshana Chachamim get puzzle. Anytime the sages said that the get is puzzle, what they really mean is puzzle upaisel, that it's invalid, but it also invalidates her from ever marrying a Kohen. Chalitza psula. Let's say there's a chalitza that the sages said is puzzle. Psula upisalta menachem. The chalitza needs to be redone. It's talking about where the husband died and she's supposed to be marrying her brother-in-law, the deceased husband's brother, and the brother doesn't want to, so she pulls off his shoe and spits on the floor. If for some reason that chalitza was invalid, so now she still cannot marry anyone outside, but all the brothers are not able to marry her anymore. Because once we do a chalitza, then no one can marry the sister-in-law. Once he says the pasuk says that who's going to build the house of his brother. But once he decides that one of the brothers decides that they're not building and they do a chalitza, then that's it for the. It goes in the order of age. But if one of them, let's say the oldest, let's say, does chalitza, then the other brothers don't do yibum. It's over. Once there's a chalitza performed, then
Even if it's invalid.
And now we're learning that even if it's invalid, the only thing you can do now is do another chalitza, do a valid chalitza. No, a Kohen is allowed to marry a widow.
Oh.
Yeah, but over here that was a different case, the Kohenim. What we mean to say now is that when we say that something was invalid, even though it's invalid, it doesn't mean that it didn't have any validity. Over here, it's saying it has enough validity that it messes up. Just like in our first case, had enough validity, even though she's not divorced, but she can never marry a Kohen as if she's divorced. So to buy the chalitza, it doesn't have enough validity for it to marry anyone else, but has enough validity that the other brothers can't do a yibam anymore.
What's the difference between doing chalitza on the oldest brother and not, and getting married, trying out to do yibum the other siblings versus the other case where she was disqualified? What's the change there? Because we learned one thing almost. This case.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand the question. If a Reuven's married to Reuvena, Reuven dies.
Yeah.
Now Reuvena is supposed to marry Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, any of those brothers.
Yeah.
Okay. One of them, Shimon, let's say, does chalitza on Reuvena. Now, the chalitza was invalid. He did something wrong. He used the wrong type of shoe. We didn't. It was an invalid chalitza. You have to do it again. Ruvena is not allowed to go and marry any other, John Doe, because she's still attached to the brothers of the husband, because the chalitza was invalid. The chalitza would have been valid; she could go marry anyone else. Now, but what about the other brothers? Can the other brothers now say, "Oh, you know what? The chalitza was it's such a shkacha pratis. I want to do yibam." It's too late. It's too late. Once you did a chalitza, no one can do yibam.
You can't do it over again.
The one who he
Invalid.
can do another chalitza, but he can't do a yibam. Chalitza
Right.
means it's like a divorce. He can't do a yibam now.
So even if it's invalid, he could try to revalidate it.
He could redo it. Yeah. Reset.
Let's say he doesn't. Let's say he dies. He dies after doing an invalid chalitza.
So another brother is going to have to do a valid chalitza.
Oh, that's okay
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
Example of the poem is that a woman is married to Israel,
Invalid, yeah.
And then the husband passes, and then she's not allowed to marry her husband.
Right.
She's considered a divorcee.
Right. Even though she really is a widow, but because of that scent of divorce, that invalidates. Okay.
It's like divorce perfume.
Yeah, divorce perfume.
Stink. Divorce. Oh, you call it
Reyach.
yeah. Smell.
I
It's a negative
see
thing.
what's going to happen now. At the Siyam on Gittin, Gittin's going to show up with a perfume, a divorce perfume, like soda water. I still have that sitting in my house. No, everyone's afraid to drink it. That's just a regular bottle of water. It says soda water on it. Yeah, by the Siyam, Yitzi gave us a bottle of soda water. That's already been erased, Okay. Marava Amri, Mishmeid Rabbi Lazar. This could be one of these experiments. You do like these social experiments. If people would buy it, Okay. In Eretz Yisrael, they said in the name of Rabbi Lazar, small valayla, psulais upaisles. If the chalitza was done on the left foot, that's psula. And also if it's done at night, it's also psula. Katan ba'an pilia, if it was a child, which we don't use a child to do the chalitza. You have to wait till he's of age. And also if there were socks instead of a shoe. Is that what it says? It calls it there? Socks? What is it called? A cloth shoe.
These are different
Like
examples.
like a slipper type of shoe.
These different examples would nullify chalitza.
There would be an invalid chalitza. Question is, how invalid is it? Is it totally invalid that it's nothing, or is it only invalid but it still is considered like something that we can't accept it, that we can't allow a yibam afterwards.
Right?
Yeah, you can do it again correctly,
Yeah.
but then you still can't do yibam anymore. You stop the yibam. Any chalitza stops the yibam. Sorry? Right, it has to be a different degree of invalid. So, cutting on place, so that's invalid, but being priceless, but you can still do yibam after because it's so nothing, they can still do yibam. Ziri takes the other extreme. He says we're on top of 25. Hey, Kulan, Ein Paislin, Chutz Menachem. None of these divorces are really considered divorces at all, except for the last one when he said that I'd like to write for me a get and I'll divorce with it whichever wife I decide later. That's the only one that's a real get. Well, not real, still invalid, but it's enough that would invalidate her from marrying a Kohen. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Af Acher Nami in a place. So Rabbi Yochanan says even the last one is so nothing that she can still marry a Kohen even after the last one. Also, Rabbi Yochanan follows his reasoning. Amar Rabasi, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabasi says name of Rabbi Yochanan, Va'achin Shachalko. There were brothers that divided up their inheritance. They're considered purchasers. And everything goes back by Yovel to be redivided. So, which means like this. Someone passed away and the children divide up the estate. That division, it's a division of land. In Israel, every 50 years, the land goes back to the original owner. Now we had the original owner had passed away. So who is the original owner? The estate. So they have to redivide it every 50 years because it's considered purchase. Now the other way of viewing it could be like this. The other way of viewing it is that since it got divided by Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, divided up this land like a portion like that, that tells me that the original transfer went directly in that division. So when the father, that Yaakov, that passed away, that now is left these 12 sons that divide up the land, it was passed over to them each in their portions. That retroactive, that would be say, if we say Brera, then we say that, what do you mean you're going to give it all back to an estate and then divide it? That's not, there was no estate. It went directly to each one, but it really didn't. It had to be divided up. But retroactively, we know that that's the portion. And if you would say Brera, then you would not have to redivide it up by Yovel. But Ein Brera, that means that it was that it has to go to an estate. We don't do any retroactive. It was divided later. So that means they're all considered like purchasers, and they have to put it all back in the.
Back to the chalitza thing. If it was an invalid chalitza, he would do equal possession. He's still married to her brother. So you have to do one or the other.
Yeah.
Right?
So if
So there
there
makes
was
sense. So
if
therefore, if we did equal, then of course she would be disqualified with the other siblings.
just 1 second. Shimon shows up. He's the living brother. He wants to do Yibam on Ruvena. So it's fine. So now they did Yibam. So now they're husband and wife. Okay. Let's say he decides he doesn't want to do Yibam. He wants to do Chalitza. So Chalitza, then Ruvena goes and marries anyone else. She doesn't have to marry any of those brothers. Let's say he does a Chalitza that was invalid. So he has to redo the Chalitza. But he can't then change his mind and go for a Yibam. Because once he started doing chalitza, then it's prohibited to do Yibam. So we're saying that invalid chalitza, although it's invalid, but it's still valid enough. Her status then is that she's waiting for her chalitza.
And she can't marry
She can't
someone
do it.
else outside.
She can't marry someone else, and she can't even marry him. Until the chalitza, then she could go and marry someone else. There's one opinion, Ziri's opinion, that says the last one is valid enough that she can't marry a Kohen. But all the other ones, she can still marry a Kohen. It doesn't even have a cent of a get. The other ones, they're so invalid that they're nothing. Yeah. Yeah, if then in the other three could just be married to her. Oh, well, actually, in all of them, he could stay married to her. He doesn't have to. It was invalid. It's only if she's going to want to later marry a Kohen, we have a problem. Yeah. Right.
But this thing with the Jubilee is hard to understand. It would be retroactive to Yaakov, to the one, right?
So there's two ways of viewing it. One way of viewing it is that it goes down, it gets transferred over to an estate, and then it gets divided up by the brothers. The other way of viewing it is that it goes directly to the brothers. It goes directly divided. Now, it doesn't actually happen like that, but because of Brera, because we view after the division, we view it as this division was done retroactively, that this was actually the transfer from the father to the sons. So then there was really there's no reason for them to, by the Jubilee, to put it back together and then to redivide it.
Yeah, because if you're going to put it back together, why stop at Yaakov? Go all the way back to the first time it was given.
No, I only do that to the purchaser. I only do that to the purchaser when the purchaser is here. You want to say that you don't. Let's say the purchaser, you buy something from something, and then the seller dies. So at the Yovel, it goes back to his inheritors. You're asking by the Yovel, it should go back. No, because this was his estate. This was his. This was Yaakov's estate that he got.
But he inherited from somebody else, right? So then it would be retroactively, right? It would have to like be redivided to the whole tribe. I don't know.
Let's say that this was the way they divided the tribes. This was the portion. Let's say that this was the portion. Otherwise, you're right. We're going to create a problem over here. Something gets sold every generation, but it doesn't matter. Every 50 years, it goes back to its original portion. What happens when it gets inherited and the family gets larger and everyone takes a little piece of it? So I guess over there also we'll have the same discussion. Are they considered like purchasers? Or are they considered like they will still have the same approach? Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure why it shouldn't go back. I understand the question, right? Okay, so basically what Rabbi Yochanan tells us is that it does go back and that they do have to redivide it by the Jubilee, by the Yovel. That would mean that there's no such thing as Breira. Well, Utzricha. Now we have two statements from Rabbi Yochanan telling me that there's no Breira. One statement, Breira means retroactive division. One statement is the brothers, that they don't keep it, they have to give it back to redivide it. And the other one was the wife that he decides later on to divorce, then the get was written on her behalf, on the one that he's going to later decide. We don't say that that's a valid get at all. It's necessary to say both of them. If it only said by this one, by the get, because over here it has to be written for her when it's being written. But over there, I would have said that it's only a sale that returns, but not an inheritance. So in other words, there's another detail here that I wouldn't have understood 100% that it has to do with Breira. Could have thought that maybe only sales go back, but not inheritances. Maybe inheritances don't go back by the Yovel. So Rabbi Yochanan tells me that it does. B'yashmin and Sada, if it would have said that the inheritance goes back, Mishum de l'chumra, because that's just an extra chumra. It's just money, and it doesn't matter. Inami ketchila. Or I could have said that it doesn't have to do with Breira. What it has to do is that by Yovel, everything goes back to the way it was initially, which means since there was a father here that owned it all, to every Yovel it goes back. It doesn't matter with how it's divided now. It has to go back to the way it was in the last Yovel. So Aval Hacha, but over here by the get, I would say that not. I would say that it's not a problem. Nothing to do with Breira. Maybe really I would say Breira. And I would say that the get is acceptable. The opposite. The opposite. Maybe by the get, I would say that the wife is still going to be prohibited from marrying a Kohen. That's the idea here. Why do I say that she's not? That the fact that she's not divorced with this, okay, because it's invalid, but she's still prohibited from marrying a Kohen because there is a slight concept of brera that does exist. Why by the field? I say that you redivide it because that's just the stringency. Just to put it back together and redivide it doesn't mean 100%. We're 100% sure about that. It doesn't hurt. Put it all back together and they'll redivide it. But over here, I would say that maybe she is slightly divorced, and she would still be prohibited from marrying a Kohen. Kamashman Rabbi Yochanan, that she's absolutely not prohibited from marrying a Kohen. She still can. It's absolutely nothing because of Ein Brera. Get was nothing. Okay. Rav Yehuda. Rav Aisha asks Rav Yehuda a question. Rav Yehuda is a student of Rav and Shmuel. He's a second generation Amira. And Rav Aisha is asking him a question. Let's say someone told the scribe, yeah, this is a very interesting way of figuring out which wife to divorce. It says he didn't like either one. It just probably didn't have money for the divorce. So he says, divorce for me whichever one exits the house first. And yeah, it reminds you of like Yiftach.
Yeah.
He's going to bring a sacrifice whoever leaves his house. So the scribe is writing the get. Now both his wives have the same name. So the scribe writes the get for the wife, but he doesn't know which one he's going to use it on until that one leaves the house. Mahu. What's going to be the halach? Amar Leis, Rabbi Yehuda responds, Tanisua, it's exactly what we learned in the Mishnah. Yes, and Mikan, when the Mishnah says, but you write the get. I'll use it for whichever one I want. And what's the halacha? Pasal lagarish, but it's pasal. Alma ein brera. You see, ein brera. We don't say that retroactively it was determined which one it's going to be used for, and it's pasal. So to over here, he says, I'm going to use the get on whichever one leaves the house. You don't say that retroactively it was determined which one that's going to be. It would be pasal. Pasal get.
Why? I'm trying to understand the logic.
Because it has to be written for her.
Oh, okay.
And it wasn't written for her, it was written for one of them, but it's not defined which one it's for.
Now with the Yovel case?
No, the Yovel case we're past now. Now we're discussing two cases of writing a get for one of the wives with the same name. One case was, I'll figure out later which one it is, whichever one I want, I'll divorce. And the other case was, whichever one leaves the house, that's the one that's going to be divorced. So one is it's his own determination. Other ones he leaves it up to Hashem, who's going to determine which one it's going to be.
How did the scribes or the witnesses know which wife he's talking about?
They don't know. They're just writing it for the name. They both have the same name, so it doesn't matter. So both of them, yeah. So we said in the Mishnah that if he wants to choose later, we said that it's an invalid get because it wasn't written for her. And now we asked the question about this one where he leaves it up to whichever one leaves. Whichever one leaves, it's not really a condition, it's the actual get. It's going to be used for whichever wife leaves first. That's the one that I intended it for. So then
But the same would apply if he wants to like flip a coin, heads or tails. This way, that way.
yeah, the same thing would apply. The only thing is that's what he's supposed to do before he writes the get, not after he writes the get. If he flips a coin before and says that heads or tails, and then they go and write the get, so that would be fine. It's only when you write the get and then flip the coin and then say which one it's going to be.
He pays full price for this puzzle get. And the scribe gets paid for it.
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Doesn't the scribe say, look, I can't do this. This is
Right. I don't know. Yeah, you wanted a guy. I thought maybe you wanted to hang it up. It was just like I knew you had a Judaica store. As a warning sign, right? Yeah, maybe he doesn't have to pay him. I don't know. Maybe he does.
She doesn't have to be present. And maybe the scribe didn't know that what he was doing. He paid the scribe all the scribe this get for me.
Uh-huh.
Doesn't the scribe have to do diligence and say, I have to know in writing?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's a good question. Professor's asking if the scribe is responsible to say that I need to know who it's for exactly, and basically, can the scribe claim his money afterwards, even though the guy had a puzzle get? Okay, well, it says Esve. We have a question on this answer that we got. It goes like this. Someone tells his sons, I'm going up to, he tells his sons, the father says, going to Yerushalayim, I'm going to slaughter a Pesach. Whoever comes up first is going to be joined in with my Pesach and is going to get some of the meat and we'll have the carbon together. Once the first son, his head comes through the gates of Yerushalayim, he gets his portion and the brothers eat along together with him as part of his portion. Okay, now what does that mean? Well, what he's asking here is, obviously there's Breira. The father has to say which son he's going to slaughter, have in mind when he's shechting. But he's not doing that. He's just saying whichever one's going to come. And one of them shows up and we say that, okay, it was him. So why don't we say that by the get? By the get, we will say the same thing. Whichever one leaves the house first. And okay, this was the one that left the house first. The get should be valid. Amalei. So Rav Yehuda says, Haishia Bri, my son Haishia, that's his way he calls him. Ma'ayin Pesachim Eitzel Gittin. What are you making this comparison, Carbon Pesach, to a get? By Carbon Pesach, we have a commentary on that by Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Kedei Lazar's mitzvahs. He was just trying to get them to hurry, wake them up in the morning to go to shul early. Whoever's in the car first is going to get it. Sorry? What is that? Oh, they both give freedom. Jeff is saying that they both give freedom. The Pesach is freedom and the get is freedom for the wife. So, yeah, I hear. But he was saying that we have a commentary about the Carbon Pesach that says that Rabbi Yochanan says that he really just wanted to get them to hurry quicker. So that's why he made it. Really, the father had in mind all the sons. He just wanted them to get there quick. So he says whoever gets there first is going to be part of it. But of course, he had them all in mind. Okay. Bekanami, and I'll prove it to you. Tani, it says, Kivan Shenichnas Rishain, Reisha Veruba, I'm taking off now. Safe travels. I'll get to the Mishnah, I hope. Moshe and Chavav. We'll stop it there. Chavav and Aleph. This brother is part of the Carbon Pesach, and the other brothers can eat with him. Now, how do the other brothers eat along? It must be that the father had them all on part of his registry, because the Carbon Pesach, you need to register. If you say that the father did not register them, so then he could register them afterwards. The only time that you're allowed to register is before the shechita. And here the shechita was done already when the brothers show up. It was one time a father did this, and the daughters came first. Turned out that the daughters are quick and the sons are lazy. Now, it didn't say that the sons did not get to eat from the Carbon Pesach. The sons did get to eat from the Carbon Pesach. The fact that it only calls them lazy tells me that they really could eat, which means that the father did not really make this as a real condition, that you're only going to be part of it if you really wanted. They were all there, but that's the way parents speak. Whoever gets there first, whoever is going to win the prize and this, and then they give it to everyone anyway. Yeah, it was a group. Right. The question is, if he said that it was only doing it for one of them, and then you were going to get going to choose later which one it is. So it seemed to work. And by the get also, I was going to do it for one. I was going to choose later. It seems like it's going to work. So that's why we were now saying that no, by the Korban Pesach it was different. He really was had in mind everyone. Again, it was only one.
Yeah, get a general get for all your wives.
I don't think that works.
That's-
Yeah. Amar Abaya. Abaya says, what just that happened here, he says, is a little bit ridiculous. It says, because the question was, if you don't know which one you want to divorce, and you leave it up to heaven by saying whichever one comes out of the house, then and Rabbi Yehuda answered him from the one where it's not going to work, because when he's going to decide later, it doesn't work. That's his own decision. Then it goes back and asks the question from whichever one of you shows up in Yerushalayim first, which is not really his decision, it's their decision which one's going to be there. He said that you're going back and forth. Now, what Abaya is explaining here is that maybe it doesn't work, Breder doesn't work, when you yourself don't know, and it's up to you. Because if you don't know, then who does know? But if it's you don't know, but it's not up to you anyway, it's up to something else. So then that's a reality that it really exists. It's not you that's not decided. It's just you don't know what the reality is later. But when that actually plays out, that reality could be retroactive. If you don't know, this is Abaya's logic. If you don't know and you're going to decide later, so we don't say that what you decide later is really what you had in mind earlier, because you didn't know. And we're not turning you into a reality. You're the one that couldn't make up your mind. You made up your mind later, so it doesn't go back to that. But if you didn't know which wife was going to come out of the house, you can't hold that against you. And what we'll say is the one that came out first, that was the one that you really had in mind. You just didn't know, but that wasn't your fault. It was Teilah B'das Acherim. It was dependent on what's going to happen. So maybe what Abaya is suggesting, maybe by us in our Mishnah where we had a get where he says, I'm going to decide later. Say that it's not a valid get. And not only is it not a valid get, but according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's so not valid that the woman can still marry a Kohen. Maybe that's only by where the guy doesn't know who he's going to decide, who he's going to want to divorce later on. But if he would say that I'm going to divorce with it, whichever one leaves my house, maybe that would be a different story. Yeah, but here they filled in the placeholders as well. Well, the placeholders possibly could be filled in later. There was a discussion about that. We'll see. Yeah. Okay. Amar Rava, my question, Rava says, I don't know what your problem is. Abaya, you're making this like so complicated. Dilma, mandi islay breira, leishna tela b'das atzma, leishna tela b'das acherim, islay breira. Maybe the one that holds of breira. You know, the Gemara here is very not clear. If it's talking about, if the question of Rav Aishia was, is it an absolutely good get that could be used? Or is it a question in Rabbi Yochanan if it's enough of a good get to make her puzzle to a Kohen? There's a huge difference. And the Gemara it's not clear. It just says Mahu. What's the din? Are we asking if the get should be 100%, or are we asking 100% valid, or are we asking if it's definitely not valid? The question is if there's scent of a get. Smelly get. I don't know what does the commentary say on the original question? Let me see your.
There was a movie called Scent of Woman 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, which was a positive idea. This is a negative idea. Like you pick something up like clothing, you smell it.
It doesn't
Moldy.
explain it here. It doesn't say it. What was that about? The scent of oil?
It was a positive
Uh-huh.
by a famous actor or something. That was a good. So this is really not a scent of. It's a moldy can.
Right.
What was the other? Putrid. You know, you smell it. And it's not good.
Uh-huh.
So this is a good get. Because it invalidates the lady from marrying
Right.
Cohen. That's
Right. The rub. I see.
moldy. They could use this perfume.
I didn't know that. It says that a man should not wear perfume, but that's only on his clothing, not on his body. On his body, he can. And then, oh, that could be. It could be. I didn't know that. Okay. Rava says that when it comes to Breira, it's an all or nothing type of thing. It doesn't matter if he wants it to be determined by himself, by his own, or if he wants it to be determined by something that's going to happen. We call that Tela B'das Acherim. It's not up to him, it's up to some other occurrence or other people or whatever. If you hold that there's Breira, then you hold Breira consistently, whether it's up to him or up to someone else. Manda Leslie Breira, and the one that doesn't hold the Breira, Leishna Tela B'das Atzmai, Leishna Tela B'das Acherim, Leslie Breira doesn't hold it either way. And therefore, you're dividing this up in this interesting way and creating a problem. Maybe that division doesn't exist. Maybe whoever holds a Breira holds a Breira. Amleira Mashashi l'Rava. Mashashi says to Rava that you're trying to put everything into boxes, to compartmentalize what everyone holds, but it's not so, because Rabbi Yehuda, the Tela B'das Atzmei Lesle Breira, Rabbi Yehuda says that if it's up to him, if it's his own, what he makes it depend on his own decision, then there is no Breira. Tela B'das Acherim, but if it's up to someone else, Isle Breira, there is Breira. So you see, it can't become, Abaya's question was a good question. All of these things make differences. Tela B'das Atzmei Lesle Breira, where do we see that if it's up to him, there's no Breira? We're following the view of Rabbi Yehuda in this. It says, we'll see soon. The Tanya was started in a brisa. Someone needs a drink of wine. He buys wine from the kutim. Now, a kuti, at this point, at this stage, they're considered Jewish. And you have to take the Chumas and Meisers. We don't trust them that the Chumas and Meisers were taken. This is not just like a regular Amaretz, where it's called Demai, and there's a suffix. This is a real Chumas and Meisers. You really have to separate it. They didn't do anything. So what he can do is like this. He only has his barrel of wine here. He doesn't have his other containers. He doesn't have other things. He says, Shnei lugim shani asad lahafresh, harei in shuma. When I get to the bottom of this barrel, I'm going to leave over, and I'll separate 2%. It's going to be truma. That's what truma is, 2%. Tremi meya, truma. Asara, I'm going to separate 10 parts of it as 10% as my serishan, as the tithe that's going to go to the Levi. Tisha, I'm going to separate another 9. That's going to be my Sheni. That's going to be the second tithe. Why is it 9? Because once you subtract the first 10, there's only 90 left, right? And then there's also Truma missing, so there's a little, it's really 8 point something. And then he can start drinking already. That's the Reb Meir, that's Reb Meir's words. You see? What happened, this is a case of Breira, because right now he's drinking wine that has in it Truma, Meiser, all of it is in it. What we're going to say is that when he's going to later separate that Trumas and Meisers, that's the one that he had in mind originally. What he drank was the chulin, was the regular stuff. But obviously this is Breira, because otherwise you'll say that 1 second, it's all mixed in here. So we say no, because when he's going to separate it later, that's going to be the one that's going to be the tune. He's fine to drink what's on the top of this barrel. You just drink it out. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon Eisrin. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon say that you can't. Now, he was Tela B'das Atzmai. He says it's up to me. I'm going to do it later. Teila b'das asma. We don't say breira. What about teila b'das acherim? Teila b'das acherim mislei breira, but he does have breira if he makes it dependent on someone else. Where do we see this? The Tanan, we have a Mishnah. Mahi ba'isin ayamim. If a man tells his wife that this is your get if I pass away from this disease. The whole interesting case over there where the husband passes away from a different disease. And there's a whole question if the first disease continued into the second one, if it's really part of that or not. So you have to basically, he gave her a get, the husband's ill. And he says, this is your get if I pass away from this disease. Well, the Gemara says, what is she during the interim while he's ill? He's a Kohen. Is she considered divorced? Is she not divorced? Is she allowed to eat truma? Let's say she has, she lives with someone else. Is she considered a married woman? Well, because there's a stipulation that wasn't fulfilled yet. The Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, Hariyah Keshes L'chol Dvareh. She's considered a married woman. But when he dies, it's considered a get. It depends if there's a younger brother. If there's a younger brother that he would have to marry, she would have to marry, but she would have to wait 13 years for him to grow up in order to do yibam. So it's better for her to be divorced than to be.
So it's retroactive to the time of his death?
The retroactive time of the death. The question is, what does it have to do with Breira?
This is Daf Acherim.
It has to do with the Das Acherim, because is he going to die from this disease or from another disease? If not for Breira, if I say Breira, then I can say, you see, the problem here is that it needs to be a retroactive get, because once he dies, there's no such thing as a get. You can't give a get after he dies. So it has to go back. Now, which means it has to go back based on whatever the stipulation is. So once the stipulation happens, we're gonna go back and say that's what it really was beforehand. So this is I don't know. This is not exactly the case of Breira. We're comparing this to Breira. Okay. Whatever the case is, we see that when it's Das Acherim, when it's not up to him, we say that we do say Breira. And when we have a case where it is up to him, we don't say Breira, like by the Chumas and Maasros. Amalei Rav Mesharshi l'Rava, who was talking the whole time? This is Rav Mesharshi. Why is Rav Mesharshi not coming in? And on the side of my Gemara, it says, it's supposed to be Ravina. Ravina says to Rava, Rab Shimon, the Taila b'das atzmai lesle breira, the Taila b'das atzmai lesle breira, the Taila b'das acher misle breira. Now maybe it is Rab Mesharshi, and he's just coming now to say the other side of this. Who held Rab Yehuda is Taila b'das atzmai lesle breira, and Taila b'das acherim is isle breira. And now he's saying Rab Shimon, Taila b'das atzmai lesle breira, Taila b'das acher misle breira. Taila b'das atzmai lesle breira. Where do we see that there's no breira if it's up to him? That's because in the case of the Chumas and Maasros, we had three opinions that held the same. We had Reb Yehuda, Reb Yossi, and Reb Shimon. Now we was explaining before what Reb Yehuda's view was. Now we're saying, well, in that category was also Reb Shimon, and he says that if it's up to him, we hold that there's no breira. He was not allowed to drink that wine, according to Reb Yehuda, Reb Yossi, and Reb Shimon. He wasn't allowed to drink that wine until it was removed. Reb Meir said he was allowed to. Reb Yossi, Reb Yehuda, Reb Shimon say he's not allowed to because there's no breira. It's up to him. But when it's not up to him, we say there is breira. The Tanya was taught in a brayso. A man is having relations with this woman who he's not married to yet, but he says these relations that we're having right now should be considered like marriage. It's one of the three ways of marrying a woman: is either with money, with a document, or with relations. Now, you weren't allowed to really do this, but he does it. could get Malkus for this. I think Rav would give Malkus, anyone that did this. He's marrying her just with relations. And he says, this is going to be considered a marriage if your father agrees to this.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not happening. Well, even though the father does not want Mikudeshes, he's still married to her. Now, the reason for that is, as we say, that a person never would have really wanted his relations to be just promiscuous, and he wanted that to be a real marriage. Even though he put a stipulation there, he didn't really mean the stipulation. That's the logic behind this. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, Imer Mishum Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda says the name of Reb Shimon, Reitzav Mikudeshes. It depends. If the father wants, then it's Mikudeshes. Lei Ratzav, Ina Mikudeshes. If the father doesn't want, then it's not considered married, which means that it goes back to retroactive, depending on what the father wants. This is going to be a marriage, which means breira. And it's bedas acherim. So according to Reb Shimon, das acherim, when it's up to someone else, we say that there is breira. Amar lei, Rabbi says back to him, bein l'Rab Yehuda, bein l'Rab Shimon, leishna tela bedas atzmai, v'leishna tela bedas acherim mislei breira. Both of them really hold of breira, even though you had a case where they didn't because it was tela bedas atzmai. Which case was that? When it came to the truma, where they said, he's not allowed to drink it until he actually removes it because there's no breira. He says that's not the reason. Awesome kidiktani time over there's a special reason why they didn't allow him to drink it. They told to Reb Meir, they have a problem with this. They say, okay, you're going to drink this wine because you can't wait till you take the truma out. You really need a drink. But let's say the bottle breaks, the barrel cracks, and all the wine spills after you drink. What happened to the truma?
You drank it.
You drank
The
wine that truma wasn't taken from.
Right.
So because of that, they say that you have to make sure that you take the truma first. It doesn't have to do. It's not because they didn't hold of breira. If you're going to actually take it out later, that would have been fine. They just had an extra concern that the barrel could burst, the barrel could break. And Reb Meir says to them, I'm not worried about that. If it breaks, then that would be a problem when it breaks. But you don't have to always worry that something's going to break and then it's not going to be truma and the truma wasn't taken. It's fine. You can leave it like that.
Reb Meir is the one that does worry about cases.
Yeah, Reb Meir is the one that usually is concerned about everything. This is a surprise. Reb Meir usually is concerned about everything. It's chayes l'miyuta, right? And over here, he's the one that's not concerned about it breaking. Do you have a pshat in that? Daniel.
I don't see anything here.
Yeah. Where did I have this Gemara? I think I had it in Sukkah, maybe.
What reward?
Yeah. You'll have to check it out. Shabbat Tov, everyone. Good week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But they say, don't worry so much about that one.